Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, here we go with another episode where we meet prominent accessibility practitioners. And today I am pleased to be speaking with Sambhavi Chandrashekar. Hello, Sam. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here to chat about the things that have gone on in your career. But before we do that, I'm speaking from my home office on Vashon Island, which is near Seattle, Washington. Where are you talking to us from today?
Oh, I live in Toronto, Eastern time zone, 3 hours ahead of you.
Well, a good place to always start is, what you're up to right now, the organization you're involved with, and the nature of your work.
Okay, so I'm the accessibility lead at an education technology company called D2L Corporation. And my role is to make sure that our products are accessible, to put it in a very simple way, but it's way beyond that. Yeah, I always like to joke that the accessibility buck stops at me, or stops with me.
And what's a typical day or week like for your work in that activity?
It's a flurry of tasks of a variety of types. Like, it's not just about the product, right? It's also about support. It's about sales, marketing, legal, everything under the umbrella, and about culture and everything.
Well, we can dig more into the specifics of that, but a good place that I always like to start is where people first became aware of accessibility, how that impacted their life in different ways, and the journey that brought you to what you're doing today. So, what's a good place to start for you, where you started to experience accessibility?
Let's start at the very beginning. Okay, the very beginning of my journey out of my country, that was 17 years ago, when I left India to study further, go back to school after 27 years in the central bank of the country called the Reserve Bank of India. I was a hardcore IT professional doing IT projects and also doing corporate training in IT. I had a science background even in my studies. I did a master's in quantum mechanics from the Indian Institute of Technology, or IIT. And after all that, I also taught for one year in a master's program in banking technology management. That's when the PhD bug bit me, and I wanted to do a PhD. And as a precursor, I did a master's for 1 year in London, UK, in UCL, University College London, because I believed that after 27 years, like, it's good to go back to school, gather your elements, and then find a good spot that you can do your PhD rather than just go there directly. And UK was a good place because you have 1 year masters. So my journey essentially began there, and 17 years later, I'm here talking with you. But I do believe that in talking about my journey, I have to talk about three things: the people that I met along the way that transformed me, the places that I went through that afforded me all the opportunity, and the perspectives that got changed all along the way. And I hope that I'll be able to introduce you to some of the people, to talk about some of the places that I've been through, and what type of perspective changes actually twisted and turned my journey in accessibility to bring me where I am here today.
Well, where would you like to start? You've certainly done a lot of different aspects in your career. You've been involved with the work through the World Wide Web Consortium, and also with the IAAP as a certified practitioner through that organization. What are some of the, where would you like to start chatting about your experience?
I prefer to chat about things that are not on LinkedIn.
All right.
That people can read about. Not even about how to do stuff, how to do accessibility, or how to, debating between conformance and compassion, or whether standards are. No, none of that. What I'm really longing to do is to go back in the memory lane and then try to trace through these 17 years, what is it that actually influenced me, inspired me, and transformed me along the journey to be what I am today. And I'll frequently go back to people, places, and perspectives, because I think those three are key in any journey, not only an accessibility journey. So going back to UCL, where I did my master's for 1 year, it was in human computer interaction, because having done IT for that long, I didn't want to do a PhD in computer science, and I was interested in psychology, so I chose to do a master's in human computer interaction. And University College London, the UCLIC, is an amazing place. And I do remember all the teaching. It was the very first time for me, after a long time, to learn, first of all, and to learn in a different system altogether, although not too different, because Britain and India, well, we do have some connections. But what was very different, what started my accessibility journey in UCL, was the fact that I did my project with students who are blind. Like, my project was about accessibility and usability. Where is the dividing line? That was the project, but it was not theoretical. I did some studies with some students who were blind. And with that data, I tried to distinguish between accessibility and usability with respect to, those days, it was WCAG 1.0 ruling, and WCAG 2.0 was struggling to come out. And it took a long time, because they introduced cognitive disabilities. They made it go beyond machine recognizable accessibility. And so that's why that question was very interesting. But the reason why I took that up was because of a colleague of mine in the Reserve Bank of India. His name is Harish Kotian. He was the first blind programmer in India, and he served the RBI in the IT department. He moderated a huge 3,000 strong mailing list called Access India, which was all about blindness and IT. He recently retired, and we still are in touch. It was he who inspired me to start working on this area called accessibility. Because before that, like, I had no idea, no clue. So that was the starting point, and Harish was the person who inspired me. And UCL gave me all the opportunity to work on that. But as you know, as soon as I joined my master's, I had to apply for my PhD, right? So I started applying, and when I applied to University of Toronto in Canada, I discovered the second person that influenced my life, that is Yuta Treveranis. Yuta is the director of an organization called the Inclusive Design Research Center in Toronto, and she's also a full-time professor at the OCAD University. And she has been my mentor since 2005 till date. And anything I know about inclusive design is from Yuta. I I'm ever so grateful to her. And so at U of T, like I moved from UCL to U of T, and at U of T, I took on a PhD in information systems because I was in the iSchool, because Utah's unit called the Adaptive Technology Research Center was housed inside the iSchool. So I did a PhD in information or information systems, whatever you may call it. But actually, it was about how people who are blind or vision impaired assess the credibility of information online. Effectively, it was a study with 66 people using screen readers. And it was an amazing PhD, 5 years. I thoroughly enjoyed the learning and all the research and all the research projects that I did with Utah, because I was totally working with her as well as a student research assistant, plus doing my PhD. And soon after, I got into a postdoc because I got a fellowship. The program is called MITAX. It's a Canadian funding agency. So I had a 2-year Elevate PhD postdoc with MITAX. Even there, I did a study on handheld devices and navigation for people who are blind. So the research was all through about people who are blind and all the academic opportunities. I really enjoy when I think back about the conferences, the papers, and everything, plus the nonprofit projects that I have done.
Well,
Then came,
yeah, I mean, you definitely were fortunate to find your way so early on in the academic portion. Yeah, I think that's a time when people first do become aware of it and start thinking about it. But it can be hard to find the mentors that you were fortunate to run into and be able to have guidance early on, so that you can be doing such substantive work early on. So it sounds like you were fortunate to have those mentors. But were you also actively looking for those people early on? Were you able to find them, or was it just kind of a serendipity of life that had happened?
I was exactly ready with that world. It was totally serendipitous that I found Utah. In fact, I finished doing the application for the mechanical and industrial engineering department at U of T, because that's where the HCI PhD is. And then I came across her website, and then I tore that application and I applied to the iSchool. And I was always an outsider in the iSchool because it was a library science department, bless my soul. But I had the best of experiences there. So U of T gave me an amazing place to progress my practice of accessibility, I should say, and strengthen it very much academically. Very interestingly, during my PhD, I would always say, I'll never teach, because I had this dream about entrepreneurship. I had created a domain and a website called Sahai IT, and I thought that's all you need to make a company. When I finish studying, I'm going to become an entrepreneur. But Utah went on to another university called OCAD University. It's a design university. And she started a master's program in inclusive design. Because I had grown with her, imbibing all her inclusive design principles, she started the master's program and she had me start teaching in that. And for the next 5 years, I taught in that program. That was the best time of my life, I should say, because every cohort was as diverse as possible. They were at least, in a class of 20, at least 10 people would have a disability. And Utah had the best infrastructure, what is currently called as the high flex or hybrid flexible, the most up-to-date technology, the most well-structured UDL practices, without realizing they were those by name. I actually taught for 5 years. And while teaching at OCAD University is where I met the third person who actually changed my perspective about stuff or about accessibility. Because through Utah, I had become introduced to inclusive design, and the fact that inclusive design is about designing with people with disabilities, and disability is a design mismatch, and accessibility is about removing that mismatch, meeting the needs, and all those kinds of ideas. But how do you practice that? How do you actually do accessibility, right? So two of my students, actually, one of them is called Alvar and the other one is Abid. They graduated and they started a company. The company is called Fable Tech Labs. And it is, I think, just about the only company, even now, after 4 years, in the world to do what they are doing, which is offer to the industry a way of recruiting people with disabilities to do every aspect of a product design, starting from research to prototype testing to QA during development to triaging for support. Everything. It's as easy as just going on the website and saying, hey, I want two people, one using VoiceOver on a Mac and one using a VoiceOver on iPhone, and two people using NVDA and one person using Zoom text and Dragon and name it. And you will get to either meet them and do your conversation and testing, or you can set up the tests online. And the whole process became so simple that it's very easy to practice doing accessibility with people with disabilities. So the perspective change that Alvar and Abid brought about in me is that to do accessibility, you need to involve people with disabilities from the beginning to the end. Conformance with standards, compliance with regulations happen on the way. Because I hate this concept of testing pages after pages after pages. I'm someone who believes in workflows. What is the task in hand? If your pages allow a way to go through and complete the task, don't worry about the surrounding things, even if they are not fully accessible. The person's able to complete the task, which is more important. I don't mean to say that it's okay to have inaccessible pages, but just by spending all your energy on testing pages completely with, I don't know, automated tools, doesn't really serve the purpose. You have to stop me on the way. Otherwise, I will keep going on.
All right. Well, I don't like to interrupt because it is interesting to hear your story. But yeah, certainly, Fable is a very interesting, progressive organization, and that does bring up, an example of where there's the shift left mentality, which moves
Yeah.
us beyond remediation and testing and maintenance after development is completed, and moving us toward foundational research, having participants with physical challenges involved in early testing of wireframes and the other things that we do in our design in our design activities. And so I totally agree with your thoughts about truly really having an inclusive approach to how we come up with solutions.
Yeah, because inclusion actually is about being mindful of diversity, equity, and accessibility, right? IDEA, that acronym, is being used by a number of people today: inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, because human beings are diverse, right? So they have different needs. So that's diversity. But you can't give everybody the same thing. That's equality, but it doesn't work. You have to give each one what they need. so that we get equal outcomes. It's not about providing equal resources. It's about enabling equal outcomes, and that's equity. And how do you do that? You do that through accessibility. So the practice of accessibility, we preach you have to include people with disabilities. Why? Because A, that's very important for inclusion. And B, if you design for people with disabilities, automatically you cover other people having constraints that are not because of a disability, but because of situational or contextual reasons. You might remember Microsoft and their famous persona spectrum. But essentially, the impact of designing with people with disabilities is much larger. In fact, recently there was another perspective change that happened, but it was when I was presenting in a forum called the Digital Disability and Dance, and my presentation was about how to teach dance inclusively. And that's when I came across this thought that it's not enough to say disability is about a mismatch between the person's needs and the environment. You go beyond that and look at disability as a resource for innovation, as a resource for creativity, right? So that's where we need to go. That's how our perspectives need to change. And I am ever so grateful to where I work now for the amazingly inclusive culture that's present, the passion of the company that aligns with my passion. Because it's one thing, it's the first important thing is to work for a place that has a purpose. And then the second important thing is that your purpose aligns with that purpose. If that happens, then you're in heaven. And being able to practice all that you dream about accessibility, if some place allows you that, then that place is really helping you transform.
Well, that would be a good place to maybe dig into that a little bit. You had such a long career in academia and teaching, and continue to be involved in that. But now you have this opportunity to as you said, get out and make some practical improvements. So what's that work been like? What are some of the things you're passionate about, or the activities that you get involved with for that?
Well, when you get out of nonprofit and academia and get into the industry, there are certain paradigm shifts that happen in your surroundings, not in you, but what is valued is different, right? The goals are different, the priorities are different. So the same kind of strategies don't work. But if you keep remaining focused on outcomes, everything is magic, right? Even here, if your outcome is that the end user has a good experience, right? That is going to serve the purpose of the company. And then you are meeting some of the goals of the company. That means you're a success in the industry, right? So keeping focus on the outcomes is, I think, key to everything. Plus, I do consider myself privileged, because in some organizations, you will have this very high barrier of attitudes and culture that you have to overcome, which was not there in my case. So it was much easier to try to practice doing well by doing good.
Well, looking forward to the future, are there any certain things that you're looking forward to working on, or another way of considering it? Are there any things that you think we as accessibility practitioners need to be paying more attention to, looking toward the future? So kind of what's your outlook as we move forward from today about things?
Okay, this was my personal story, so I'll also conclude on a personal note. In North America, we are privileged, right? We are in a privileged position with respect to knowing about accessibility, with respect to practicing accessibility, and making an impact on those who need that assistance. This is not the case globally. I come from India, and I know of several places around the globe where the knowledge about accessibility is lacking, and lacking in the sense people with disabilities do not know that they can demand and get accessibility done. So what I dream of is to reverse what I went through. Like, I met people who inspired me and mentored me. So I am in that club of Lainey Gold. I'm sure you know a lawyer famous for her structured negotiation. So she believes in this concept called accessibility eldering. And I am also an accessibility elder. What I dream of is to be among the people who inspire and mentor the next generation, to get into organizations and transform the places, and try to change perspectives globally about what disability is, what accessibility is, and how the world should be.
Well, that's definitely something that I think should motivate all of us. And so, I want to thank you for giving us a little bit of an insight into the people that have kind of made your life move in this direction, and the things that you're looking forward to in the future. So, thanks for taking the time to share your experiences with me.
Thank you, Joe. It was a pleasure.